question window that is part of GoToWebinar. We'll be sure to queue those questions up for the end. Some other online classes that we have coming up, if you're interested in learning more about some SharePoint topics. This is more of a training format, 3-hour, but they are online. We have a developer crash course with Liam Cleary as a SharePoint MVP, all around authentication, authorization, and security. We also have a document management webinar coming up in October that talks about all the document management capabilities available within SharePoint. So those are out there available for you as well. And then let's talk about today's session a little bit. Today's topic is metadata versus folders, the age-old debate. Our presenter today is Julie Muccillo, one of our senior architects here at Tech. I'm Steve Witt. I will be your moderator as I have been in the past. You can use the chat window again or the question window if you have any questions or need any help during today's session. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Julie, and we'll jump right in.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Let me just get the presentation queued up here. 1 minute. And hopefully everyone can see my screen. And if so, we'll just get started. Great. Once again, my name is Julie. I am a solutions architect here at Tech, and I am coming to you live from the United Club in O'Hare. So if you hear any interesting background noise, they're announcing some flights to Hong Kong and other exciting things. So we're going to get started. Today we're going to talk a little bit about some of the pros and cons of using folders, some of the pros and cons of using metadata, and then some other things you might want to think about in terms of organizing your document libraries, tagging your information, and allowing your users to get to that information. And then we'll leave a few minutes for Q&A, and hopefully this will be interesting and informative. I'd like to thank my LinkedIn folks out there for inspiring this topic. So it was definitely a topic of debate out there on who likes folders, who likes metadata, and how do we bring those together. So we'll get started. So folders, everyone is familiar with folders. They're our old friends, right? We have file shares with folder structures that, we've all agreed upon that, you organize your files by client and then maybe by project and then on and on and on down the hierarchical line. And this whole idea of folders was introduced by Microsoft to emulate the file cabinet. If anyone remembers old Windows, you had the little file cabinet. You could search for you could kind of dive in and create your folders, et cetera, et cetera. There was a comfort level with that because it's a hierarchy, because it was how people used to search and organize information when it was physical. It also leads the user down a path to the information. So if everyone knows to start with their client and their customer, then they're able to sort of dive down and go from there and find some of their information. So we're going to look a little bit at how we're using folders today. And some people say you should get rid of folders entirely. I don't necessarily think that that's true. I think there's a few cases where you may want to use folders. We're going to see some in action. And one of the ways I'm going to show you is actually for a small team-only kind of content. And I'll give you a real-life example of that. And then also, we'll get into it a little bit later, but it's also a good strategy for extremely high volumes of files in one library. Microsoft SharePoint has limits on how many files you can see in one view, and it's around 5,000. So if you have a really big old archived document library with lots and lots and lots of content, and I've seen them, you still may want to consider folders to help sort of break that down and provide some different views. But I'm going to jump into a little demo real quick here, and I'll go ahead and go to a folder that a library that I actually use all the time. This is actually our real life sales folder. We have some support documentation, and we actually use folders to kind of separate out some of our information. We have our third-party information, we have our sales presentations, some documents that we'll send out to our clients, and then we have some other information below. And these folders are really, everyone's familiar with them. Everyone, kind of knows what's inside of each one of these. But what's also unique about this library is no one else in the company really uses it. This is something that's for our reference. no one else kind of really needs the information in here. So it's a great internal tool for us. And this is your typical all documents view. You can kind of see here's our folders, here's all the other content, and it's pretty easy to get to. So the one thing, though, is that you may not always want to look at this content in this way. And that's one of the arguments against folders, is that people need to look at things in a different way. So one of the things that I did for this particular library, I actually created something called the flat view. So if I said to somebody, hey, I just uploaded a new document out there in our in our support documents for a third-party thing that we're working on, they could actually go and look at this flat view. And what the flat view does is if you go in and kind of scroll down, hopefully everybody has created a view before in SharePoint. If you haven't, this is how you do it. There's actually an option in here called folders. And you can actually say, do you want to navigate through the folders to view the items, or do you just want to show all the items without their folders? And so I've selected that option. And if I go on and go up to the top level, it's actually just sort of open to all of you, so you don't have to spend time waiting to do save. You can see that this library is now just completely flattened out, and that our document library is sorting just by most recent. So original view, we have our document libraries, et cetera, and you kind of have to sift through things to see what the most recent one is, and would have to go into each folder. Or you can take the flat view, and so that's reached by just a simple drop-down here. And you can create other views as well that may organize it in different ways. So I think that that's really important to think about when you're creating a document library and you really do want to use folders, whether it's somebody really still likes folders and thinks they're necessary. You can create alternate views to be able to get to that information. And then also the other thing to think about is, even though you have folders, you can still apply metadata. So I have my enterprise keywords showing here. Now, these don't all have to be tagged, but you can actually still use metadata and use folders. There's not a one or the other sort of situation. And then you can obviously create views using some of the keywords, which I'll show you in a second. But that's a really, just really important lesson, I think, to know that, there's not just, it's not an end-all, be-all. If you have folders, you can't have other ways to look at information inside a library. So I'm going to hop back into our presentation. And
hey, Julie, before you keep going, is there any way you can turn your mic up a little bit more?
Sure. How's this? Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry, everyone. So going too deep with folders, what happens? And some of you on the phone may recognize this image. It's a phone book. It's the white pages, and the yellow pages, actually. But if you take a look at this white pages, you may remember that you were using a white page, book. All that you could do is look up somebody alphabetically, and then you basically had to scan. If you knew their first name, you were in luck. If you knew their general neighborhood or what their street was, that was good information, but you still had to scan through everything to kind of see exactly who you were looking for, what you were looking for. You could never look up somebody by the exchange of their phone number. You could not, you couldn't sort it out by the neighborhood or by a street name or something like that. So when you use only folders and levels of folders to organize information, you kind of lose a lot of that descriptive data because it's just a folder. And you can't, just because it's in a folder, doesn't mean that information is directly associated to it. So that's kind of the problem, is when you start just sort of looking at things with one way and sort of a hierarchy to get to that information, you're stuck. You're stuck with this one sort of path. And if that's not the path that everyone understands, people are going to have a hard time getting to that information. So metadata. Metadata can help you get beyond those limitations of sort of the hierarchy and sort of leading that user down one path when they may, in fact, want to go down a different path to find this data or to find this file. So metadata can be used in both display and search, and that's really where it differentiates itself from folders. Folders is, they're simply a container and they don't associate themselves to a document. So searching doesn't really pick up a folder. It doesn't do that. So we need to find other ways to also tag your information so that it's more accessible by more people in different ways. So tips and tricks for folders. We talked about creating a flattened view. We can talk about applying additional metadata and trying not to layer your folders too deep. Those are the things that if you want to use folders, it's fine, but try and use these other methods as well so that you get a more effective setup, a more effective search, and people can find more ways to get to that information. Okay, let's talk about metadata. Metadata is descriptive keywords. It's multiple facets of your data. So it's just like when we were thinking about the phone book, right? It's not just a last name, it's a first name, it's a street address, it's a neighborhood, it's an exchange, it's, your area code. All of those pieces of information could help somebody find something they're looking for. And what metadata does is it slices and dices your data. Anyone who's worked with a data warehouse or has looked at multidimensional data understands that people may want to browse, search, and sort of organize your data in different ways in order to use it for different things. And I guess the big thing about metadata is that you do have to do planning in order to really make it work. In SharePoint 2010, you have access to the Managed Metadata Service, which you can create standard taxonomy trees, which can be used throughout your site collection. And I'm going to show you a few things inside a demo where you can actually see how we're using those to organize, to filter data, all kinds of different stuff. So let's take a look at that in a second. The downside, there are limits on the numbers of files shown inside a library, which I talked about a little bit. The other, sort of, not downside, but really just sort of caveat is that people need to be educated about how the tags should be used, what the available views are. Not everyone realizes that there are multiple views inside a document library, so we'll talk about a couple things you can do there. And then, of course, it's only as good as the quality of the tags. So the tags are subject to human error. Same thing with folders. People can put something in the wrong folder. People can tag something with the wrong thing, but generally speaking, if you go through a process about the best way to tag documents, if you set up metadata in a way that's easy for the end user, it'll just take them a few seconds, and they really do get better results. By the way, this is going to be available in the sort of post-webinar materials, but this link is great because it kind of goes through every single limit in SharePoint. So in terms of size, database size, document limits, all that sort of stuff. So this is just a handy thing to have bookmarked if you ever want any questions answered. Okay, let's go take a look at the metadata. So first we're going to take a look real quick. Simply at one of our document libraries that we use, we actually, for all of our customer documents, we have a view called by client, and this is actually metadata that comes from a list in our sort of CRM system, and every person in sales knows that when they upload their documents, they are supposed to tag them with a customer. We actually have a field in our properties that is specific to the customer, and pretty much every person, especially, this is a new site and we're just tagging some old documents, but all of our new materials all are tagged, and our team understands the importance of using that. So I'm going to jump over to a sample example so I can kind of manipulate it and show you some other things. But this is just part of the process when someone is uploading a document. And I'm going to just pick a document here that doesn't actually have any keywords. So if I go ahead and take a look at this doc, and I'm just going to edit the properties. It's going to prompt me to check it out. I'm going to go ahead and check it out. And if you take a look at this is just a demo site that we use to show folks all the various wonderful things SharePoint can do. We can see that there's an enterprise keywords area, so that I can go ahead and tag this with several things if I want to. But then there's also a really specific one called benefit. And what I've done in this specific field is actually tied it to a specific tree of information inside our managed metadata service. So it's not like somebody could mistag this with a customer name or a document type or whatever other sorts of managed metadata term sets you might have out there. This is a very discrete set of terms, and I'm going to be able to tag it. You can make it mandatory if you want. You can make them optional, however you want to do it. I think if you're really looking to organize and manage with these pieces of metadata, you should make them mandatory. I'm going to go ahead and click save. And now this document, I just go ahead and just going to check it in real quick. Just practice here. Publish it. Oh, I double-clicked it. Sorry, that's my bad. Anyway, we can see now if I go to a new view that I created that's called by benefit, I can take a look, and we have now 4 documents that are in the health section, including cover, which is the one that I just tagged with benefit. And what I'm doing in this view is I actually am grouping by the benefit managed metadata, so that I can not only look at this by most recent documents, so that just gives me my big list of information, but then I can also sort of tailor it down and make sure that I have enough documents for each type of benefit, or oops, some new person just joined and they forgot to tag these other 11 documents. We better go in and fix those. So that's just another way to look at the information, and that's a very easy process. Now, another thing that we can do is create an entirely new view. And let's say that we wanted to actually create a filtered view. And I'm going to go ahead and create one by benefit. I'm going to sort of use that as my starting one. And I'm just going to call this health only. And so I'm going to use sort of the benefit view as a baseline. And then what I can do is actually say filter, where benefit is equal to health. And that's a keyword, and I can just click OK. And now you can see that that view has filtered down to just the health information. And so I had also created one earlier called just dental only, so that you can really kind of hone in on all of these different views. Now, one of the other things that I was mentioning is not every SharePoint user understands that this menu is actually available to them. So one other thing that you could do, if you're really concerned about your users' access and usability, I actually went ahead and modified the All Documents view. And what I did was I just created hyperlinks to the different types of views that I created and that were available at the time. And so this just gives them another way. It actually takes away that the drop down and puts it right in front of them, so they can go, oh yeah, I'd like to see it by benefit type. And then I haven't gone through and changed the other pages, but this just kind of gives you an easier way to get to that information by creating this little mini navigation inside. So that's just a method that we've used in the past that kind of helps our customers see the views in a better way, especially if you're training people on, using these to their advantage and finding information more easily. So another thing that we would just like to point out is in search results. So I went ahead and I searched for monkey earlier, and this is just yet another site that we have as examples. And the tags can help you refine the search as well. So all of these things, all of these pages and documents were tagged with various items, and so it's doing a full text search, but it's also doing a tag search. So I can narrow down the monkey search, the one document that had monkey. So that's really powerful to be able to sort of tailor down that content after you search and be able to use those tags to further refine your search results. And I'm going to pop back over. I think we've gone through each of those points. It takes a little extra time to tag, but not too much. You saw all I had to do was type in health on the one document and sort of tag that benefit. We can find things through the search. We can create a lot of different views based on that managed metadata. And just into consideration, making sure you take advantage of those group size and those filters, and creating site columns that are connected to specific term sets within your managed metadata. Being creative and simply using hyperlinks to expose those views in an easier way, and then taking advantage of exposing all the tags as part of the refinement in the search results. So those are some things that ways that you can take advantage and use the metadata, and I think it really provides a little bit more robust experience than just a folder structure. This is, it's so powerful, and when you take that time to implement it, it's really fantastic. Which leads to my next point. What about all of your existing documents? It's tough, not likely, impossible to manually go back and tag tens of thousands of old documents. You can create some scripts to try and help you as you sort of migrate content and that sort of thing. But I wanted to bring your attention to a tool that I'd heard about a few times, and I actually got in touch with them as a result of this conversation about metadata and folders. And there's a tool called DataFacet by Wand, and it allows you basically to create rules to let your documents in document libraries be auto-tagged. It's really powerful. It allows you to change how documents are tagged over time. You can reapply rules. You can sort of amend the rules. So as your business changes, you can actually sort of change your tags along with it, which is fantastic because people change what they call things. People change how they organize things. People change, they restructure all the time. So when I saw this product, I was really impressed by, all of the capabilities that it had. Now, one thing that I will say is, it can be done in bulk. You can run these tools on entire document libraries. It's lightweight. It's absolutely necessary that you would plan, what your auto tagging rules would be for your organization. DataFacet has some great kind of pre-existing taxonomies and things like that, but there's some really powerful stuff where you can say, if you find the word contracts or agreement, tag it as a contract. You can sort of create these business rules that make sense for your documentation. And there is a cost to it, so it's not a free product by any means, but it's a really excellent product. I think it's a good value, and it's something that, would really help if an organization is serious about taking advantage of metadata and being able to tag and display and search on documents. Here's just a couple screenshots. This is the regular document library in SharePoint, and if you take a look at the item up at the top, you can either tag, sort of auto-tag and run these scripts on selected documents. You can do incrementals if you've created new rules, or you can sort of annotate the entire library and start from scratch. Those are some of the powerful tools inside of that DataFacet tool. And then also, this is just a screen of, sitting inside your central admin. It has this sort of taxonomy set up where you can create the rules I was talking about. So, if something has contract and agreement in it, you make sure it gets tagged as contract. The great news is, after this conversation and some other conversations, DataFacet will, and Wand, they will be presenting a 30 on Thursday webinar in October. So we're really excited. And they'll go into grave detail on this tool, and you can find out a lot more information. So that was really great news for me. We just kind of finalized that this week. So in summary, we're coming up on the end, and I want to leave a couple minutes for questions. I think folders are best for really small team sites or very large libraries where you're going to basically run out of room with your views and things like that. Metadata in general provides a lot more flexible views. It requires some education. You can use these tools together in certain circumstances. Metadata is also super powerful in terms of the search, the ability to sort of refine your search. Probably all things you've heard before, but I just want to reiterate that, by applying that metadata, you can really get great results in both display and search results. And then also for large amounts of data, for old and archived data and things you want to bring into SharePoint, these automation tools like DataFacet exist, and we're very, very interested to see their presentation and let them teach you a little bit more about that in October. So, all right. I think we're almost to the end. Any, Steve?
Yeah, thanks, Julie. That was great. There are,
No problem.
as you can imagine, there are a number of questions. So I'm just going to go down through in order. The first question goes back to where you did the flat view. Where you basically showed the example of a library that had folders and then creating a new view called it flat view. Is that option that you selected in there, is that available in SharePoint 2007?
That is a great question, and I am not sure because I never used it in SharePoint 2007. I will check, and we can follow up.
Okay. Great. Next question is when using a flat view. Skip that one. Does the view that is grouped with the managed metadata work if you allow multiple selections, i.e. if you had tagged both health and discounts, would it work with that multiple select?
That particular group by view doesn't, because it doesn't, it's a unique sort of view, but what you could do is if you go, here, let me just flip back to one that has multiple items real quick. 1 second.
So if you would have tagged your cover document with both health and 401k, would it show up under both? Because
this is a unique, like group by is a unique, so you would only be able to group by if you have one selection. But what you can do is enterprise keywords as a column. If you include it as a column, people can also sort on that. So if you wanted to see, multiple things, or if you wanted to filter down on just things that were conference, obviously that didn't have anything. But because the group by is unique values, you can only use that group by feature if you have one item, or a single tag versus multi-tag.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Can you go back real quick? Someone is asking this. How did you actually create that breadcrumb trail of views on the one? Remember where you had the?
Yeah. I mean that was actually very, very manual. So this is actually what I did was I edited the page, and I just dropped a content editor web part in there. And because a view is actually just an ASPX page, if you look at this URL, well, let me see, hang on. Each one of these views is really a different ASPX page. So I actually, if we go ahead and check out the link here, 1 sec. It just goes to most recent.aspx. So this wasn't anything fancy. You would have to manually add links, but we have some smarter ways to do this. But just for demo purposes, this is a really simple way to add these to the top of the page. And you can literally drop in a content editor web part to any document library page. So, okay. Did I answer that one?
Yep.
Great.
Thanks for that. Next question. I don't know if this is an easily answered question. There's probably a whole other webinar into itself. But what are the benefits, and why would we use enterprise keywords?
Well, that is a whole other webinar. Maybe we'll do one on that. But enterprise keywords is great because, for instance, even in our document library with our client docs, we have, if we go in, we'll just take an example here. And looking at properties in a document, I can tag things more freely. So in this case, I don't have specific things. I could technically create something that says type of project, type of document, version of SharePoint in here. But what this allows people to do instead is just sort of free tag these as this is a work order, this is using SharePoint 2010, this is a consulting engagement, it's for an intranet. So those are like just very, I can add new ones. Let's say we were using Mintex or Data Facet on that particular item. I could I could also throw in a partner term. So it allows me as an end user to sort of create the best, set of tags. What that also does is we have a tag cloud here, which shows me, just what kind of work orders, what kind of change orders, how many pricing matrices do we have out there, all that sort of thing that might be important to me. That sort of free enterprise keywords, those allow me to build that tag cloud and see, what the trends are in our work today. So, but we could do a whole nother webinar on that, yeah.
Right, exactly. Next question is, this particular person has 20,000 items in their library, with some views will always have more than 5,000 items. What recommendations do you have to deal with the throttling issue aside from increasing the view limits?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. I think, part of it is maybe taking a tough look at, do we truly need that many documents? At this point, there may be some organizational things to do, like archive off older files from that. I do believe that there are some sort of process things that you might want to consider. Why are there 20,000 documents in that particular library in the first place? There's definitely technical, recommendations we can make around that, but that again is probably a whole other webinar. But I would take a look at, are there other ways that you could potentially kind of wholesale organize that information that may split that out into multiple libraries so that it's more easily, manageable and that sort of thing.
Gotcha. Next question. Let's see. Does search work effective with the flat view of folders? So if you change and have that flat view, does it have any effect on the search?
No, not at all, because the search is going against the document information, so it doesn't have any impact on it.
Okay. Next question is, there's actually two of these related to, what about the impact of folders in security? Doing folder level, is there folder level security, and is security a valid argument for why you would go with folders?
Honestly, if you have a lot of security issues or reasons why content should be segmented off, you can secure by folder, you can secure by document, but it does get really unwieldy to handle, because out-of-the-box SharePoint, there's no good way to see all of that, in terms of who has access to what. So we typically recommend, if you have content that needs to be segmented off, that you may actually want to do different libraries for that content. Even though you can set item level security, you may want to consider folder level, because it's just, or I'm sorry, library level, because it is easier to manage from just a human perspective to know, okay, only these people can even see this library. I can safely put this information in here. The item level security was kind of a blessing and a curse when they introduced it in 07. At first, in 03, you're like, I can't believe we can't do this. And then you get to 07, you're like, why would I ever do this? So you need to think about why you would do that. Have some compelling reasons for it, or else I would do it by library.
Okay. I think we have time for maybe two more. Let's see, I'm just looking through. Oh, here's a good one. What are some recommendations for training general users who are resistant to basically adopting meta tags over folders?
Well, that's a great question. I would say that first, a couple of things. Try and make it as easy as possible. So similar to how I had the specific term set of benefits, if there's 3 or 4 things you want people to tag, try and make them separate fields so it's not as overwhelming with, like the enterprise keywords that I showed you. That's for a little bit more sophisticated audience that, is comfortable tagging things with multiple terms. Trying to sort of break it out field by field is a little bit more basic. People are more comfortable filling out a form almost, as sort of the edit properties form. And I would, I think it's worth sharing, whether it's a cheat sheet or a 1-minute video or something like that about how that metadata can really help you search and find information later. Because I think that, for me, that's the reason I do it. I don't, when I tag a document, the whole purpose in my mind is so that I know it will end up in my group by client, so that the next time I'm working on something later, I can always go back, get it by client, or I can, do a search and get only my pricing matrices and things like that. So, I think selling them the value of not just you doing it, but what benefit it brings to you later as an end user is really important.
Gotcha. And we have a lot of questions out here, Julie, and what I think I'm going to do, because a lot of these questions are starting to circle in the area of the managed metadata and taxonomy, and I think the idea of doing an entire session on enterprise keywords, and that is probably is a worthwhile topic. So I'm going to leave those for those of you who have asked questions related to tagging and keywords and when to use enterprise and how large they can be, all of those. We're going to save those, and we'll have another whole 30 on Thursday session coming up probably at the beginning of October before we do the data facet one that talks all about enterprise keywords.
Great. Well, thank you guys for all of the great questions. I appreciate your time and your ears today, and hopefully you've learned something and at least sparked your interest on how you can use some of these tools inside of SharePoint.
Great. Thanks, Julie. Thanks for your time today, and thanks, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Sounds great. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.